to go. We've got, I'm Hannah. We have Karin, Skacel, and Kyle Cunneke is here to assist in the meeting. I think we're just making sure. Oh, go ahead, Karin.
Oh, no. I'm good. You're doing great.
Okay. So we have a few questions we submitted ahead of time. So we'll get into those. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them directly in the video or just type them into the chat and we will get to them. Otherwise, we're really excited to have you here and I look forward to answering some questions and getting to know everybody. Let's see what.
I think we should probably wait a few minutes, Hannah.
Yeah.
Because we had a lot more people sign up. Let's give them a few minutes to log on. Sometimes it takes people a couple of seconds to do so. And in the meantime, I'm wondering if can we do like a raise of hands of who has the addiExpress king size versus the Addi Professional, which is the one that has 26 needles on it?
Oh, looks like 90%. Oh, maybe 100.
They all have the king size?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good choice. Although the small one's good too.
I have both.
You have both?
Yeah, he raised two hands.
Right.
Oh, fantastic. Well, and actually, I think that's the best way to go because there's the most different types of items that you can make when you have two machines versus one machine, the big one and the little one. Because if you combine the two, it's amazing what you can do. Who are you? What is your name? I'm sorry, I can't see you.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Tom Olson.
Tom Olson. Oh, nice to meet you, Tom Olson. So are you a knitter as well?
No, I
okay.
strictly using tools such as the Addi. I started out with the peg looms, a circle with and the long ones as well. But then when I found the Addi, I was really very happy to get into that, and I've really enjoyed using it.
And what do you use it for?
Well, I'm learning more, but primarily hats for the larger one, and headbands for the smaller one.
And are you selling them? Are you gifting them? Are you doing charity knitting? You sell them?
We have a business, Vivalden Farm Alpacas, and we make things out of our alpaca yarn and sell them in our shop. So.
Very nice. That's great. That's great. Anybody else here have two machines?
Kathleen has a question. Oh, she doesn't?
Can you?
She's muted. Can't hear you, Kathleen. I think your microphone.
Can you unmute yourself?
There. Hi.
Hi, Kathleen.
Hi. I only have the one machine, and I use mine for I forgot the word already. I work with a group that we help needy people and homeless people and like that. We make hats, scarves, and we sew, knit, and crochet. And so I just got the machine about a month ago, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it with the hats. And so I want to learn to make a scarf. But so I'm thrilled about this meeting. So I'm in.
Excellent. Excellent. And then it looks like, who else do we have in here? How about, we have Pat Scott in here. I didn't know you had a machine, Pat.
Yeah, I have a king size and I just bought the egg roll. The egg, I call it the egg.
Oh, the Addi egg.
The Addi egg. Because we make boards and to use decorations for Christmas and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right.
But
I was going to say, because you're such a proficient knitter.
Hats. I did a few hats, and then I wanted to see how it would look up if I used a kind of, I would say fingering. I used on the king. So this actually it worked pretty well. It's pretty long.
Yeah, that is. But it's a scarf.
It's
you can
narrow. I mean, it narrows once you take it off, but that's fine.
Okay. Well, good. So I think Hannah will probably get going now because I think it's about 5 after now or something like that. So if anybody else comes in, Kyle will let them in. Oh, there's a couple more people joining us. So, or maybe they are. They just don't have videos of themselves up, which is just fine as well. But if you want to join us and we can see your faces, we like to see faces as well. So just turn on your video. As we are proceeding, I think, Hannah, did you already mention that if you have any questions, if you enter them into the chat room, especially if a question comes to mind and we're talking about something else, just put it in the chat room and Kyle will get those questions back to us so that we can answer them. But we did get some questions that were asked for us in advance. And Hannah, I think you have all the answers to those all prepared, right?
I have some answers. I hope they're all the answers you're looking for.
Okay, so take it away.
Sure. So we got two questions that were pretty much the same. One from Tom and one from Vicky West. I'm not sure if she's here, but they both asked about whether or not and when to lubricate their machine. So the machine shouldn't have to be lubricated ever. It does come with lubrication from the manufacturer. It will very rarely ever need to be lubricated by you, but if you really do believe your machine has gotten too dry and it really just needs that extra love, as long as you look for a plastic safe grease or lubricant, just be sure that's the most important part. This is plastic safe, and you can always test out a little tiny part on your machine somewhere on the top or maybe on one of the legs or something. Leave it overnight and wipe it off in the morning just to make sure there's been no degradation or damage to the plastic. So as long as you're careful to make sure to find a safe product, then you absolutely can. And another question Tom had was how much tension should one apply and does yarn make a difference? And that's a very good question because the yarn absolutely can make a difference in your project, as will tension. So generally knitting, pretty much no matter what project I do, I will let the yarn go through my fingers as it's going into the machine. And you can alter that tension depending on the yarn, depending on the gauge you want. I've even had some projects where with the same exact yarn, holding it with different tensions and got completely different sized projects. So you can absolutely customize and experiment with tension there. And as far as yarn, the stretchier the better. And for the most part, yarns that have natural fibers like wool or alpaca work really well because they're just a little bit more stretchy usually. So if you could find a blend, or like Tom, if you already have a farm, you've got a gold mine right there. Lots of beautiful natural fibers, sounds like. So I think you've got a really great selection. And does anybody have any questions so far? Should I just keep going with our previous questions?
Can I add one thing on the machines with the lube part, just to make it clear that the machines don't come with lube. They actually are lubricated already once you receive them. So it doesn't come separately with it. And unless your machine, and I know Hannah does a lot of the machine repairs and so on that come into Skacel, at least we look over the machine to see what's with them. And unless a machine is super, super dry, I can't see any reason to use any kind of lubrication. I have some of the original machines that were red, white, and blue that were back from the 90s, and they have never been lubricated and they still work perfectly fine. So in general, I don't think you need it. What does help, what I find is, you know, the canisters that you use of the of air that you use for your computers, you know, for your keyboards and everything else. After I do a project, I like to hold my addiExpress upside down. So I just hold it in this position and then just use the can and spray like this. And then that, oops, I just dropped my needle. And then that way the air will release all the extra fibers that are in there. And I don't know if you guys all just noticed that I dropped my needle. Did you all know that there's a place on the actual machine to hold your needle for binding off? Does everybody know that? No? Okay. Well, on your machine, there is on, unless your machine is super old, let's see if I can hold it up. On this little ledge here, there's a tiny little hole right there. And that little hole is actually meant to hold that tiny little red plastic needle that, boy, I covet those. And for some reason, they always disappear because I prefer those over metal any day. But those will fit. And right now I have a little metal one that I dropped on the floor, but those will fit right into that hole and it won't go, see, it won't go, well, I've got to figure out the camera. It won't go all the way in. It'll just, there you can see it. It'll just sit there for you and it'll be waiting for you for when you need it. Good little thing to know.
Oh, yeah, I found it. Yep.
You found it. Yeah, it's really helpful.
Yep.
That
Thank
way
you.
you, yeah, you're welcome. You won't lose it nearly as often as like I do. So anyways, okay. You had more things on the list there, Hannah?
Yes, I think our next question is from Kathleen. Yes, you asked, you tried to set the machine to make a scarf, 35 needles wide, and there's some confusion about where to put the stoppers. So the stoppers should be placed about 4 to 5 needles past your edge. And the stoppers actually go on the red ring. Hang on, my machine is clamped onto my table, but I can kind of show you. Karin might be able to show you as well.
I'm interrupting.
Yeah.
I did play with it a little bit today, and I got it to start working.
Oh, good.
And so I figured out how to clamp those on. I got onto YouTube, onto one of the Addy YouTubes, and so that helped.
Oh,
And
good.
so, yes, I think my question more is the spacing of if you want to make something 30 stitches deep, how far on each side do you put those? Well, I know on one side, it's sort of like a set spot, but on the other side.
Yeah, well, if you have your machine set to plain knitting so that it stops when you, oh, mine is. So
Yes,
my machine is set to plain knitting, so it won't go past the first needle. So if you wanted to cast on, say, 30 stitches, you would cast on your first stitch on needle 4, the first white needle.
okay.
And then count all you would cast on all 34 if you want to 30 stitch project. And then for your stopper, you're going to want to get about 5 needles away, between the 4th and 5th needle away, and you put your stopper on this little red bump in between those needles. Because and also, if you're not quite sure if you've got the placement right, I would recommend starting your project with some scrap yarn or some waste yarn.
And that's what I've been playing with.
Perfect. Yeah, that way you can make sure you got just the right amount of stitches, you got your corners going good, and then you can just very easily remove it later.
Okay, now another quick question on that. With the, when you start it and you go over and back and then start over again, it's like there's this sort of big loop out there. I get confused of tension maybe to tuck it in.
Pull that yarn. In other words, when you get to the end of your row, when you're knitting panels, the key to getting a really good panel is that when you can't turn your handle anymore, use that other hand that is holding the tension for the yarn and pull back towards you and hold it nice and taut as you change directions, and then slowly release it as you're changing directions. And that way you'll get a nice smooth edge. But you really do have to pull it back. Otherwise, you will get those loops every single time. And what Hannah just said about using the waste yarn, excellent idea. I do it all the time. Use the waste yarn until you have that tension perfect, because every single yarn is going to knit differently. And some of them are going to need a lot more pulling than others, depending on how much stretch they are. But that's how you actually control that edge, is by using that other hand, which is most likely your left hand, because the cranker is on your right side. So just once you get to the edge, pull it tight, start cranking, and then go to the other edge and then do the same thing.
Ah, okay. Thank
That
you.
should,
Yeah, I made a lot of progress today because I kept retrying it. And so I learned a lot. But this is fine tuning it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah,
you're
Yeah,
welcome. That's why we're here.
right.
I'm thrilled about the machine. I've made 4 hats already.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Great job. Well, how long have you had your machine?
A month.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Well, I was knitting on other projects, and then I was doing fleece neck scarves because we had to get a bunch out to the people who needed them. And so I was really working on that. And so, but yep.
Nice.
And then I tried to come up where it's single, like on the top part, but then it's the band. And I got confused on that. And I went, I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'll just make it long and tuck it in and double it, because that's what a lot of especially out here in Colorado, we've got snow. And so they need a double hat anyway, you know. So for our people out
I
on
think,
the street.
yeah, I think that's the most popular hat made, is probably the hat that is reversible. So it's two-sided, because it is the easiest. It takes absolutely no knitting knowledge. And at the end, you can just bind it off, tie that knot and pull the other edge
Really
and be done with
slick.
it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
works really, really well.
I
And then
love
you
the
can also,
machine.
that's, oh yeah, I guess that's one of these.
Uh-huh.
So exactly. But you know what is, if you're making these too, you can always put a little button here too,
Oh,
and then make, if you know how to crochet, you could crochet yourself a little loop and then just button it. And then that way people would have 2 items. If they're cold around the neck, they can wear it around the neck, and then they can take it off, and then they can, stuff it inside and create themselves a hat
good
too.
idea. I'll let my ladies, there's about 40 of us
Oh, wow.
that get together. We do a lot. Oh my goodness. We help 2 Indian reservations, and we're just outside of Denver. And
Well,
so,
if you ladies are doing that, you should submit what you are doing to Makers Mercantile at hello@makersmercantile.com, because
okay.
we do have our Makers Heroes. And so every once in a while we choose Makers Heroes, and they get a shout out in our newsletter. It's something new that we just started. Now we have some really cool bags that say Makers Heroes on them. And then you also get sent yarn. So, and if you are doing knitting on the addiExpress, we have the perfect yarn that will ship you for knitting on the addiExpress.
Well, that'd be cool. I'm the first person to have the Addi because a lot of us, hand knit and hand crochet. And then I tried to get one of my ladies. She wanted to buy a machine while it was still on sale, and you guys were out of it. But, I talked to Kyle, and he said, yeah, not until April, but we're working on it, because they saw it in action, and they were thrilled. Okay, we'll let you get back to the teaching. And so,
all right. Hannah, floors.
Sure. We have 2 more questions that arrived earlier. Gretchen asked, binding off. I drop stitches while binding off. Any tips? So there are actually two ways I would recommend binding off, and Karin might have some to add to this as well. So you could either switch to waste yarn or scrap yarn and just knit a few rows on waste yarn, and then just remove your yarn from the yarn guide, crank the handle until all the stitches have been pushed off the machine, and then you'll have some live stitches, but they're going to be live stitches of waste yarn. And then you can just either thread your main yarn through your live stitches of your main color and then remove the waste yarn, or you could then easily close it using a crochet method or a hand knitting method. The other way, when you're just binding off on the machine without waste yarn, I normally like to, so you know when you're finished with your project, you're ready to take your yarn out of the yarn guide. So you do that, and then you turn the handle one full rotation all the way around, so all the stitches have been able to pick up their very last kind of stitch, and then it's ready to come off. When you get to that part, I normally don't turn the handle fully. I kind of crank and bind off intermittently, like do a little bit of picking up off the machine and a little bit of cranking so that there's no chance of any stitches popping off without me wanting them to. I hope that helps answer her question. I think she might be in here. The other question is from Deborah. She says, do you have any hints for successful flat panels? And I think we already kind of got a little bit into that. So waste yarn is a really great option. You can use waste yarn knitting in the round, knitting flat panels. You can end with waste yarn, begin with waste yarn. It's such a handy thing to be able to do. Just really gives you a lot of freedom.
I'll give it a try. I haven't had a lot of luck with flat panels. I'm doing really well with the hats, and I'm actually even in the process of making a blanket of all things.
Oh, well, that's exciting. Flat panels can be tough. There's a learning curve for sure, but they just take some practice.
Yeah, I end up doing the beginning knitting thing. It goes this way. There's just not. So that really helps about what you said about the 4 rows past, and then also tugging it right before you go back around the other way, right?
Yeah.
It towards you.
Yeah, it can get kind of confusing because you'll notice you have to knit a few stitches past where your edge is actually
Right.
in order for the machine to pull the yarn around correctly so it hooks. So once you,
And that's why you tug it. Yeah.
Yeah, the more you do it, the more your eye will get trained on how that works. And yeah, just takes a little bit of practice, and we're always here if you have any questions about it.
I was going to add a little tidbit on the binding off part. And I don't know if we can focus on my machine for a second. There
it is.
Oh, okay. But it's in the wrong spot. Okay. It's sort of hard to see. What Hannah said was extremely accurate, and that is you don't ever want to go all the way around. All your stitches will be released from these little, gosh, we can't even see. This is not working so well. But these 2 little prongs here, if you notice, those actually hold the stitches down. That's why we don't need weights. And so once there's no yarn in there, there's nothing to pull it down. And if you turn too far, like I think most of the manuals will tell you to go like 10 stitches and then start pulling them off. I have always found that I use the needle in my right hand and I crank with my left hand and I stand at this angle. I'm not so sure if you can see that. And so then I can pull off 1 needle at a time and nothing else is exposed. So there's not a single stitch that could actually fall off on me. And then of course, the closer I get to the edge to doing all of them, and I'm making a mess right now because I only found on a few rows. But if you do it like this, you will never, ever drop a stitch because you can't, because the stitches are locked into the machine. And that's where, that's what makes this machine so nice compared to other hand knitting machines where you need weights. You don't need weights because the yarn is actually pulled down into that little socket that falls between those 2 little red pegs. So I think we can put it back on me or on Hannah, because I just don't think I'm close enough to show it. But does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, no answer. So I guess
Yep.
everybody's muted. I don't know if anybody's shaking their heads because I don't have that view right now either. But and then of course, if you plan on doing some hand knitting off of it, just if you have a circular needle, don't use this, use your circular needle and just pull the stitches off directly onto your circular needle. And then if you actually even have an interchangeable set, just use one of the really fine needles to pull them off. And then once you have them pulled off, you can just change the tip and make it a thicker tip if you need a thicker tip without any problem. And that works really well too. That way it's just ready to go and ready to knit off. So that would be my suggestion.
I just noticed that you had your machine on a, like one of those wooden bar stool things upside down.
Yes.
That's cool.
This is the best and cheapest way to
Wow.
hold your machine. You can get a stool at, your local store. What
Yeah.
you want to do is actually, if you actually ever work on a couch, this is just like the perfect height to go between your legs on a couch. In other words, the stool goes on the ground, but then you have the machine right in front of you. Or like right now, I actually have it on a table, but then you don't have your legs on it. You take your legs off. And the only thing that you have to make sure of is that you have these brace bars, at least 2 of them, on the stool, so that you can put your machine in there. But that way, if you're doing a super duper long scarf, doesn't get in your way or anything. You don't have to drill any holes in tables or anything. And when you're not using it, you just flip it over and you sit on it. So it works really, really well. And I'm glad you asked about that, because that was one reason actually why I set it up like this here in the shop, was so that you could see how it works like that. It does not work for the small machines. It only works for the large machines, for the Addy Kings.
It's like a really tiny.
Pardon me?
It's like a really tiny stool.
Yeah, well, you might be able to find a really tiny stool.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Okay, I'm going to take this off. There we go. Back to you, Hannah.
So those are all the questions that we had ahead of time. So what do you think about opening up the floor for any additional questions, Karin?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do we have any others, Kyle, at this time?
I haven't seen any in the chat, but if anyone else has any questions about the machine. I know one thing people were asking was what kind of yarns are ideal for the machine? So I thought maybe, and I know that we have some, I think you were going to talk about some of the yarns that we have in the shop that work really well for the.
There's 3 yarns that I absolutely adore for the machine. One is our Simply Worsted, and it works extremely well. Weight wise, it's a worsted weight. All 3 of the ones that I love to use are worsted weight. It works really well. It runs through the machine very nicely and so on. It does come on a hank, so you do need to actually ball it or cake it before you use it. And then the other 2, I'm really sad to say, but it's actually good for you. They are clearance yarns. We have one that's called Nimbus. That is this one. That's the one that I made this hat out of. And it is 100% organic merino that used to be $14.50, and now it's marked down to $7 a ball. And it is super soft, pure merino, not for charity knitting, because you're not going to want to wash it, because you're going to end up with a hat this small.
Yeah.
You're going to want to hand wash it. So it's probably not the best thing for charity knitting, but whereas the Simply Worsted is machine wash, tumble dry, and so we don't even worry about it. But this one, like I said, $7 a ball. There's a lot of nice coordinating colors that are available. There's that. Here's one that's knit out of the Nimbus too. This is a multicolor, and it also, oops, this one's actually tied together, so I can't actually turn it into a cowl or anything, but that shows those colors. So that's one of them. It's called Nimbus. That's what it looks like. Is that the right way when you see it, or is it the wrong way?
No,
It's Nibus. Okay.
Right way.
And then pardon me, was there a question?
No.
No. Okay, the other one is one called Summerino, and it's also a 100% merino, but it is a superwash. And it's going to run anywhere. I think the colors run anywhere from $5 to $6, and they used to be like $10 or $12 as well. It is also a worsted weight, and it also runs through the machine like butter. So these are all really, really great for hats. Like Pat was showing you, she did her long scarf and she did it in a fingering weight. Fingering weights work just fine. You just have to control it a little bit more with your tension with your hand, and you're going to get a more open type of netting effect versus a hat where you want it dense so you can't see through it, so you actually keep the warmth in. But you can easily use fingering weight. I know Hannah I've got a bunch of pieces here. Hannah has written what is by far the best book out there on the addiExpress, and that is called the Essential, what's it called? I always get it mixed up. The Essential Guide to Machine Knitting for the Addi.
Machine knitting with the addiExpress king size.
Perfect. It's a really long name. We'll just call it the Essential Guide. Anyways, she's got some really, really great pieces in there, including this sweater, which is on the stand back here. This great pillow that she has made on the addiExpress, all the scarves that you see behind me and everything, the bag. And here's something that she did that some of you may not know or think of doing that is actually really fun. And that is sort of double knitting. So she did a scarf. I'm wondering if I can actually show this really well. Can you see the stitches within the stitches?
Yeah.
So what she did is she did an open work on the outside, which is explained in the book. And then on the inside, she actually used, I believe it's a sock weight, isn't it? Is it Zauberball?
Yeah, I think it's a Starkey 6.
Stärke 6. Okay. So she used a finer yarn on the inside that has color so that when you wear it, you actually see the color underneath, which is really, really cool. Another thing that she has done in the book that is really a lot of fun is drop stitches. Now, I know everybody hates dropping stitches. I hate dropping stitches on the Express too, but it happens once in a while. But in this case, you purposely drop stitches, and then you can actually, is that the way you did it on this hat, Hannah? You crocheted up then?
It's actually just crocheting, embellishing it. The one you had before that did have drop stitches though.
That had the drop. Okay. And normally if I were doing a hat like this, I might drop some stitches and then use another yarn and crochet up with that other yarn through those drop stitches. That's also, if you have a hat, let's say you made it and it's a worsted weight, yet it seems too tight, or you have a big gentleman's head, you could actually in strategic places like drop 5 stitches, crochet up with another yarn, and that will actually widen your hat a little bit. So that'll give it 5 extra stitches, because sometimes, you know, some men's heads are really big, and this is not quite big enough to go on their head. And so using that little trick to make it a little bit wider works quite well. I noticed somebody was saying too that they were making, they were trying to make scarves. When you're making scarves, if you do it on the Express with, and you do it back and forth, so you do plain knitting and you do a panel, you're going to have really, really curled edges, really, really curled edges. So my suggestion always, if you're doing a scarf, is to do what Hannah has done here, is actually knit in the round so you get a 2-sided scarf. And then at the bottom, I think on this one, she has just attached the bottom stitches with tassels. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Close it off with a crochet hook and put some tassels on them.
And if you don't want to close it off with a crochet hook, you can also use a knitting needle and then pick up 1 stitch from each side and put on, you know, some ribbing. And if you do that, people actually think that you hand knitted it because you've got the ribbing on the end, which, although this looks hand knitted too, but there's a lot of little things that you can do that will make a really big difference. As long as there's no questions, I'm going to show another piece here too. Is that okay, or are there questions? No. Okay. This here, I don't know if any of you are avid knitters, but we had a little, Skacel had a little thing a while back, it was called the Fiber Factor. And one of the challenges was we gave everybody an addiExpress and they had to make something on the addiExpress. And we had a lot of really, really awesome pieces. But look at this sweater. This sweater was also done on the addiExpress.
Oh, wow.
And Pat, you said you just bought the little Addy egg. See that? The little I-cording? The I-cord would be done like on the Addy egg. But this sweater, if you look, you can't see the seams very much. I mean, you can barely see them. And if you look on the inside though, you can actually see, let's see if we can turn this inside out. You can actually see where the two seams are. So there were flat panels. And then she actually sewed them together from the outside. So that is the key, I believe, when sewing panels together, is to sew them together from the right side, going through the stitches back and forth, because that way you can pull at it, get the right tension, the stitches will all match and they'll all line up. And it tends to look seamless like this does.
Wow.
So, and I think she actually did a little shaping in the back. And that shaping she actually did with using the stoppers. So she actually went in a little bit towards the end and did a little bit of shaping, which is quite nice. But, and the sleeves, she did flat panels and did the shaping on those two and then sewed them together. So it's amazing what you really can do. And like I said, one of the best books out there that shows how to do all this kind of stuff is Hannah's book. And this is not supposed to be an advertising for Hannah's book, sorry. But I am throwing it out there because it really is an awesome book. I'll put this back on the body here. Here we go. Hannah, do you want to explain this piece just slightly? Just a little bit?
Okay, that's, oh, right, that's the shawl. So we have a couple questions in the chat too, so we'll get to those. That piece
Oh, okay.
is a, I wanted to find a way to make a triangle shawl with the machine because I think they're beautiful and I hadn't seen one. So that one absolutely does utilize flat panel knitting. And I didn't actually use stoppers with that because you're changing how many needles you use pretty much every row. But for a construction of something like that, you can start off on 3 stitches, like a very small number for the very tip, and then just steadily increase on one side all the way until you get to the maximum amount of stitches, which is 43. And then you slowly decrease back to the other side. You can create, you can create triangles. I've seen some really cool patterns in the books from Addy for the machines. There's one of a skirt where they actually made a pleated skirt by making a bunch of really narrow triangles and seaming them all together. So you really can, you don't have to be limited to tubes and squares. You really can make anything on that. So that shawl actually is the knitted triangle, and there's also a pretty significant amount of crochet on the edge to kind of make sure it pulls down, because stockinette, which is what that stitch is that the machine knits, will roll. So it's definitely handy to be able to find ways to pull it down or create ribbing. So that was a fun project.
So increasing, you just add on the yarn like you normally would when you first started, you know, when you first cast on?
Yeah, it's so much easier to increase than it is to decrease. All you have to do to increase is, say if you don't have a stopper on your machine, say if you're just using your hand, all you have to do is knit one more stitch over to increase, and your machine will do all the work, and you'll suddenly have a bigger piece. It's really easy. You just knit one stitch further than you were before. And in order to decrease, you actually have to, if you have a loom hook, those are really handy. They look kind of like dentist tools, but they're usually made of plastic or something. And you actually have to physically remove one stitch and put it on another needle so that they knit themselves together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that has to be done exactly where the cage is too. The cage for the yarn. Or did you find another way to do it, Hannah?
I'm not sure what you mean by cage. Oh, you
Uh,
mean the guide?
the little gold cage.
Oh, yeah.
I call it the cage. What do you call it?
I call it the yarn guide, but we can.
Oh, the yarn guide. Okay, there we go. I guess it cages my yarn, so I stick it in there.
I like
You know
that.
what? And I should point out too, if you look at your yarn guide, there's several different holes that are in there. When you open it up, there's a hole on the top, there's a hole on the bottom, and then of course your yarn can come out the end. So depending on what kind of yarn you are using, you can actually thread it through. You don't always have to just thread it through that hole in the bottom section. You could also put it through the bottom section coming out of the top and then going onto the needle, or you could go straight to the needle. Or if you have a really finicky fat yarn that you really want to use, you can actually skip that altogether and just use your hand and hold it in there. But that takes practice. I mean, you don't want to just think that you can do it and go off and do it. It's like panels. It does take practice. But once you get the hang of it, it works really well. So,
And another thing too, real quick about the versatility of the yarn guides, you can actually use 2 smaller gauge yarns, one coming out the top and one going through the back, to create kind of more multi-dimensional looking projects. I've tried that a bit. You could also run them both through the same hole, but you can kind of plan out which yarn you want to be visible on the right side, depending on where you put them in the yarn guide, if you're using 2 at the same time. So that can be fun to experiment with as well.
Wow.
yeah.
Mm,
And you can do Fair Isle.
Yes.
A what?
all excited now.
Yeah.
There's
Play.
a lot of things that you can do. Most people just think of tubes, hats, but there's so much that you can do with the machine. A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the hats are so easy, so
Yeah,
you kind of,
they are.
you're just like, okay, this is easy to do. And then the scarves were fun to do. So I want to, like I said, really get into the flat pieces because I want to do the same thing, is to make some blankets and to make some flat pieces.
Mm.
Like that sweater, that would be kind of fun to do,
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah. There were other questions, Hannah?
Yes, we have a question from Tom. He asked, do the needles ever wear out? And I would say, I mean, it is a plastic machine. It's not made of metal. They're meant to be used as hobby machines, not commercial machines. So it is possible for them to wear out, but it does take a pretty significant amount of work for that to happen. Your machine should come with a few replacement needles. So if you do find that you seem to have a problem area, you can easily replace them. There is video instruction on, I think on our website on how to do that, but there's lots of other videos on YouTube as well. So do they ever wear out? I would say that's definitely possible, but I wouldn't say it's probable or like it's something that you'll have to worry about. What do you think, Karin?
There isn't a reason for them to routinely. I know I've broken needles and then replaced them. I've gotten replacement needles from them, but I just wondered. I was curious.
Oh yeah, I mean,
It'd be hard to wear them out. They are, I mean, it would be really hard to wear them out, I think.
I would say you're likely to wear out the handle more so than the needles.
What you could do, I mean, the only thing that I've had broken needles. I've never had a worn out needle. And sometimes when the cage isn't closed properly and you start turning and so on, that little tip, if you hear a click, click, click sound each time a needle goes over, that means that your cage isn't closed. Okay, what did you call it? The yarn guide. The yarn guide isn't closed properly. And if that needle keeps hitting that, I guess that could wear down that little tip a little bit. But other than that, I just can't imagine a scenario where, unless you're knitting something that you shouldn't be knitting, like, Brillo pads or wire or something. By the way, if you knit wire, your warranty is void. And it does work though. Anyways, yeah, That would be the only thing that I could think of that would actually wear it out. Other than that, it's probably just going to break.
That's
So.
what's happened to me is it breaks, you know, especially if you leave the yarn guide open. Then, you know.
Well, you should never leave the yarn guide open when you are knitting.
Right.
You should always have your yarn guide closed. But I guess, yeah, if you accidentally leave it open and you start knitting, that's the best way to break a needle, I will say. So it just goes.
Thank,
Yeah.
Thank you. I do have one more question there. You know, is your book available on the Maker's site?
It is. I did. Yep. And actually, Deborah just asked that in the chat. So I just shared a couple of links for anyone who'd like to take a peek.
Oh, yeah, there.
So if you look on Ravelry, you can actually take a peek at all the projects because they're all kind of listed on there individually. And the book is available on Ravelry as well as Makers Mercantile's website. So if you guys want to check it out, there's some couple of links there.
It is digital only at this point. We should add
currently,
that in.
Right.
Yeah.
It's currently only digital, but physical copies are coming. So they're on the way. And if you are not already subscribed to the Makers Mercantile newsletter, you can definitely be the first to know when they are available. So I'm sure that they will be putting that in there too. And Sue also, let's see, she wanted to know a little bit about what type of projects are in the book. So Karin did kind of show a few of them. It's basically, yeah, there's one, a companion, a complete essential guide for a complete beginner for the machine. So it starts off, there's 30 patterns, starts off with the most basic pattern you can possibly make, and then slowly progresses all the way up to a big blanket and sweaters. So there's hats, cowls, scarves, there's a bag, there's a pillow, there's gloves. Yeah, pretty much there's a pretty good variety in there. There's lots of unisex designs. I would say they're all pretty much adult sized. But like I said, if you can play with gauge as well to make smaller projects.
I like the book a lot too. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I ordered that right off the bat, got it on my computer. Oh yes.
Oh good.
Oh yeah, I had to have all the tools so I could research because I'd never worked with a machine. So.
And
I've
isn't
always
it a good book, Kathleen? I mean, she's very detailed about all the different parts and what they do, which
Oh,
is
yes.
not found in a lot of the books. Yeah.
Yes, she is very detailed.
Yeah.
That's
It's a big book.
It was
How many pages is it?
Oh, I don't know, 100 and something.
Yeah,
it
somewhere
is.
in there. And it's nice
chock-full.
because by having it on your computer screen, you know, you can really look at it, and then you could even, you know, just print it to a sheet and just have that without having to have your book constantly open. And so, but having it on the screen, that is cool.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah.
That. Yeah, it's it was a lot of fun to make, and it definitely took a village to make it. So there's some great minds that went into making it a reality.
Another thing with the screen is if you have a touch screen, you can take it and open it more and get right down where you want to really see it too. So
that's a great, yeah, that would be helpful.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and you can do a screenshot and print it.
Oh yeah, that's
for that little section.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's part of my background from, I'm retired now, data management. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Well, that all sounds very wise.
Are there any other things there on the chat?
Looks like there's one new question from Susan. She wanted some more tips on marling or using 2 or more yarns held together. So there is, I believe there's only one project in the book that has that. So kind of like we were talking about earlier, the yarn guide has multiple holes, which you can use separate yarns in. If you had a black yarn and a white yarn, and you wanted the white yarn to be on the right side of your work, you would have it coming out through the top, and the black yarn you would have coming out through the back. So you can use the yarn guide to have a little bit more control over what your fabric will look like. But if you want it to be kind of more like a sort of organic marling that isn't really predictable, you can just have them coming out through the back at the same time, and you're kind of, as you're cranking, the yarn will sort of twist and turn, and it'll make a really cool pattern. You can do that with any two colors. I would recommend just be sure that it's not going to be too thick for the machine to use properly. But other than that, yeah, you can have a lot of fun. I mean, it would be neat even if you use 2 yarns together, then switched. You could get kind of a little bit of a different texture. There's so many things you can do. I hope that helps, Susan.
Yeah, and you can always stop in the middle of a round too and switch the yarns out. I mean, it's not like you have to do it in any given place. So like she was saying, if you just use one color, I mean, if you use 2 colors, you can use one color as a base and then just use scraps that you have and continuously add different scraps of yarn in. You can even, you know, with fingering weight, you can actually use 3 strands. And I don't know about you, Hannah, when I do my separate strands, I do not wind them together first. I hold them separately.
Yeah.
It seems whenever I wind them together first, they bulk up on me. So I just hold them separately, and that seems to work a lot better.
Yeah.
Do you have the same?
Yeah, I would say depending on how your yarn is put up, like whether it comes in a bowl or sorry, whether it comes in a ball or not, if you have to wind it into a cake or whatever, I would recommend if you're using 2 yarns or even just 1 yarn, have a bowl, like a ceramic bowl that your yarns can sit in so that you can really just turn the handle at whatever speed you like to go without having to worry about your yarn rolling off or getting away from you.
You could take a paper sack and roll it down so you have a bit of a where it's more
Bowl.
steady, and then just lay it, put it into the paper sack, and then it won't go too far on you.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Pretty much,
And-
yeah, contain your yarn is a good idea.
And then when you add a yarn and you need a little tension on it, I use one of these clip things,
Oh, yeah.
give it a little bit of weight. So it, especially when you just get it going. So this is white. It's one of those magnets that goes on the fridge. So.
Mm. And when you switch colors and be on a round too, if you're doing something that's a tube, I would always suggest, I mean, I like knotting my yarns. When I change the color, I actually, after like 3 or 4 stitches after I've changed the color, I take the 2 ends and I tie a nice little tight knot. And I tie it really close up to the little red grids, and then snip those shut. And then when I'm done, it's all, there's no holes or anything. Instead of waiting till everything is done. No one's going to see the inside of your work. That's the great part with having a tube, you know, is nobody's going to know what you did on the inside. So you may as well have as many knots. It also means that if you're knitting with a yarn and all of a sudden you come to a knot, some of the knots, if you knit nice and slow, you can actually control them through your guide, and you don't even have to stop knitting with them there or anything. You can just knit them right in and then just pull that knot onto the inside of your work, and you won't see it at all once your piece is done. So, well, what time is it? We have about 5 more minutes or something. Any other questions or suggestions, or anybody want to show something exciting that they've made or that they've seen? I mean, we're still learning all the time. I will say there's been a slew of people due to COVID-19 that have been using these machines. So all of a sudden we've gone from very few videos online to there being hundreds of videos online, which is pretty impressive because there's some people out there who have some really great, interesting ideas. But yeah, so if you have anything you want to share, we're love to hear it.
Yeah,
There's a person up there with a beautiful one. Her last name is Getz, G-E.
Deborah showing us the beautiful project she
Oh,
has.
that is gorgeous.
Really is
Thank-
gorgeous.
Okay, hold on. I gotta.
Oh, there it
change my-
is. Oh, wow.
Oh, nice.
So I've just been doing tubes and then I mattress stitched them together.
Nice.
Oh, so they're double thick.
Yes, because I'm also a charity knitter and somebody else
It's a
from
great
Colorado,
idea.
people on the street, they get cold. They need something to keep them warm.
Oh,
Right.
out here, yes. Oh, that is a wonderful idea to do it round and then put it together.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and it's really not hard. I mean, I've been doing it as I go because was afraid if I just did tubes, then they'd sit there and be tubes. Or they'd end up being scarves.
What
Yeah.
part of Colorado are you in?
I'm near Greenwood Village, so
Oh, okay,
Southern
I'm in
Denver.
Broomfield.
Mm.
Wow. Thank you for sharing
Right.
that. That's wonderful.
I'm having fun doing it just by picking how many rows I want to do and then going together.
Very nice. That was
Thanks.
Kat Bordy has a pattern book that she wrote for Skacel back in the 90s, and it actually has the same thing. It has a blanket that's in it that's also done with tubes that are then sewn together with mattress stitch on the edges of the tubes, and it gives you a double wide blanket. It's really great if you're making baby blankets and so on too. To do it that way, you have a nice thick piece and it looks beautiful. So
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
We have another question from Susan. She is asking, she has a fingering yarn that is 4-ply cotton / acrylic that isn't very stretchy that she can tell. And if anybody else has used yarn like that. Well, I would caution you against using any yarn that has acrylic or cotton in it. You can use acrylic. Cotton is really not a stretchy yarn. So they don't work the best in the machine. So if you have some that you would like to try on the machine, I would be careful with it. You can try it. It's some work. So primarily, I would say natural fibers work the best. And if possible, if you have cotton that you try and it might work for you, it might not.
Now, what about
everybody,
if it's
oh,
fingering? Still the
Um,
same?
That's pretty small. It's a pretty small gauge, so you might be able to get away with it better if
Okay.
it's small. It really depends on the yarn. You really just got to try
Yeah.
it out. I would say,
Slow.
yeah, that's slower.
everybody knows how to release their yarn from the machine without actually binding off, correct? Just by turning the handle with no yarn in there?
Yeah.
Okay, because when it comes to, test knitting, that's one way. Just don't cut your yarn when you're done. Just crank your handle, release it. If you don't like it, put it back in a ball and then use it for hand knitting or something, because cotton's a tough one to run through this machine, and it does like to break needles because it has no give.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other yarn, if it gets stuck somehow, it has a little bit of give, but the cotton has no give. So yeah, the fingering weight shouldn't be a problem. I mean, that aspect of it, just the cotton aspect is not good.
That's
So,
kind of what I thought.
yeah. So, but you know what? It
That's
might
what my
work.
mind
You
went
never
to.
know until you try. You really don't. So, all these truths are just, information. You never know.
Mhm.
Right.
I have
And
2 more things.
oh,
There is one more question that we got from Susan early on that I'm not sure if we got to. She asked, when and how do you take apart your machine for cleaning? I would say, kind of like Karin said, you probably don't need to take it apart so much as try and routinely blow out as much fiber as you can. But if you need to take it apart, if you like it's gunky in there, we do have some videos on Maker's website, and I can put those into the chat. But also, if you go to makersmercantile.com and scroll down to the addiExpress replacement parts, each part each listing is going to have a video with me in it on how to replace it. So really, I would say the keynotes to keep in mind whenever you take your machine apart is to remember that the screws on the top side of the machine are different than the screws on the bottom side. So when you do take it apart, make sure to keep them separate. It's fairly simple to do. They really can only go back together in one way, and there's only so many parts. So it's really not as scary as it might seem if you've never done it before. It's totally doable. I would say if you're looking for a good video on how to take apart the machine all the way, I would Google gold handle Maker's Mercantile and get to that listing, and that will show you how to get all the way to the very innermost nooks and crannies of the machine. So that should give a good idea of how to do that. And my other thing for everybody is we actually have a coupon code special only to you guys for Maker's Mercantile for being here. And I think it is good for anything on makersmercantile.com. And that is king size 10. And I'm going to type it into the chat for you as well, so you can keep it for your records. And it's 10% off. So it's capital K I N G. Oh, okay. Through the end of the month, Kyle says. KINGSIZE. And then the number 2.
I think I'm gonna have a pen that works.
Capital KINGSIZE 10. That's your 10% off coupon code till the end of the month, which is in just a few days. So it might be fun to do a little weekend shopping.
And you might want to consider some of these yarns that run through the machine real well that are on sale, because when they're gone, and they really are beautiful yarns to use. So
Is that did you just put that in the chat or?
Did. You not able to see it, Pat?
No, maybe.
I can type it again.
it's king size 10.
King size 10.
King size 10. Okay.
Yes, king size, like, the king size machine.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm Kyle. Here, I'll type it in there.
Capital K, is that correct?
Capital K.
Yeah.
Yes, ING and then size 10. Or yes, that didn't sound right, but it was right. So, and I just want to add one thing real quick, and that was Hannah was saying the screws on the top and the bottom are different. Yeah, you don't want to learn that the hard way. And if you ever do have to take your machine apart, I would definitely make yourself 2 little bowls before you even get started to put those screws in, because they will roll around and they will disappear, and they are not a replacement part that we sell. So then you got to go find your own little screws. But if you put out, just tiny little bowls that you use in the kitchen for, prepping stuff and so on, and just set them to the side and put them in there while you're working on it, it just makes a huge difference. Because I know I've done it on a couch and stuff like that, and then I lose them and I can't find them. And so, yeah.
I do that with the needle.
Well, now you know where the needle goes, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Now you know where the little hole for the needle is. So that's good.
We do
That's
actually have
great.
the screws available for sale now.
Oh,
if
we do?
anybody does need them. Yeah, we have the set.
Look at that. I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's
So
why we have
those
them.
are, if you need them, they're available.
Oh, awesome.
Thinking.
Good to know. Thanks, Hannah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that about does it.
I
Am I-
thank you
yeah.
so much, ladies and everybody. I've enjoyed this.
Oh, well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for coming. It means the world to us.
This was
learned a
great.
lot.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
for coming.
Have a great one, everybody.
You guys all have a great one too. Have
Okay.
fun with your expresses.
Yeah,
Oh,
Frankie.
Bye now.
bye-bye.
Bye, Tom.
Bye.